And why is the carpet all wet, Todd?
I don't know, Margo.
Hi, my name is Nicholas Guest, and you're listening to Monday Morning Critic.
Nicholas, I'm dying to ask you. So, I mean, you've said this in other interviews, but I saw during my research, you and your wife, your lovely wife, Pamela, bumped into Quentin Tarantino.
We did.
And I just found this story so fascinating because it's such a compliment to you, and it encapsulates what Quentin Tarantino is, the fan he is. Like, he might know more about movies than anybody.
I agree. Yeah.
So long story short, you bump into him, and what does he proceed to tell you, Nicholas?
Well, this was the context. Also, we were at the BAFTA tea, which we're going to again this year, which is nice. But yeah, he was talking about actors, and I said, yeah, I was in that movie. He said, I know. I said, I've seen you in all of your movies, and this movie was The Bell Jar, and that was essentially my first movie. Maybe there was one other, and I had one scene in it, directed by Larry Pierce, based on the Sylvia Plath thing. But anyway, he said, I know, I saw it, and then I saw you in this movie and that movie, and I mean, to say the least, it made my day. And then he took a picture with us. I mean, it's just, as you say, he's a fan, but it's a wonderful thing when you meet somebody who really loves movies and knows movies,
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah. And knows your work on a sincere basis. It's not like he had time to prepare before he met you. Like I did research on your life knowing we were going to speak. There was stuff I knew and things I didn't, but he randomly bumped into one of the greatest directors on the planet. He happens to know your filmography. I think that's just such a great story.
It was pretty amazing, I have to say.
One of my other favorite facts that I learned is that, and we're going to obviously get into Christmas Vacation, and I want you to know I came prepared. I want you to know that. Is that Bill Hickey, who plays Lewis in Christmas Vacation, who is married to Bethany, for those listening, was your acting coach. How freaking...
Very first acting coach. And if you I will tell the story. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so it was at HB Studios, which is iconic in New York City.
Right.
Village. And a friend said, try out HB. And so I was assigned to Bill Hickey's class. And I go up the stairs. It's a beautiful old building, a beautiful old brownstone in the village. And it's important to know they're creaky floors of the staircase. So I get into the classroom. He's not there. And we're all waiting and waiting and waiting. And suddenly we hear somebody coming up the steps, slowly but surely. He enters. He says, I woke up. I had a cup of coffee. I took the subway, but I got here. Who's doing Shakespeare? And I thought, this is unbelievable. So this kid who had studied with him before got up and started doing something from Hamlet. And he leans forward and said, what are you doing? And the kid said, well, I thought that Hamlet, to which he said, you knew him? I'm with the right teacher.
Right.
Then he pointed to me. I was absolutely terrified. And he said, you're doing an improv. You're in prison. That's that woman over there. She's going to play your sister. So we start to do this improv. And I'm saying, please get me out of here. I didn't do it, or whatever it was. And he entered as the warden of the prison. This was all spontaneous.
Right.
And I said, all right, I'll calm down. And he said, I threw you a curveball, but you caught it. Ibsen. It was total bliss, because it was also, this evokes a whole other time.
Right.
Right. I mean, it doesn't exist anymore. And he was doing 1 million plays at that time. I saw him play in Joan of Arc, play the Dauphin, just incredible.
Yeah, it's a different time. It's really a good way of saying it. In another interview, I heard you talking about actors. You mentioned Walter Matthau was at one of your plays, and
it's my very first play. Yeah.
To this day, Nicholas, I will stand by his. I mean, he's done so many wonderful things. I will stand by the fact that his role as the coach in the original Bad News Bears, 1977, still remains one of the best performances I've ever seen. Like he was 40 years ahead of the curve as far as what parents were like, what coaches are like. I I love him in so many ways, but that's a great story too when he approached you, right?
Well, the thing is, yeah, he saw me in this play, and I had the honor, my God, of working with one of the greatest actresses of all time, Maureen Stapleton.
Mm.
This was my first play. I was directed by Anthony Perkins too. It was just an amazing experience. But anyway, he came, and actually I had dinner with him because he was a very close friend of Maureen's. And he said, what were you doing with your foot during the performance? I had two scenes. I said, what do you mean? And he stood up and he showed me how he was illustrating how my foot was like kind of leaning over. I wasn't really planted on the stage. Because I was nervous. So he said, well, straighten out your foot. You have to be, he started to instruct me. And that was one of the first performances also.
And this is Walter Matthau, right? Yeah.
And then people like Alan Arkin, all kinds of people came who became a sort of mentor to me, and instructing out of total kindness and wisdom. He was Walter Matthau is really, people don't even know how versatile he was too.
Right.
Obviously, he was a big guy and he had that voice, but he could go in and out of many different kinds of characters.
Yeah. Nicholas, is it hard as an actor to develop, learn the craft, understand the craft, and not get starstruck? Because I don't know. I feel like you were at a time of your life where you have these legends.
I am always starstruck because I'm in awe of these people, and will be forever, and know that the whole journey of it, it sounds a little pretentious, but it's just ongoing of like what we can learn. I got to work, for example, with John Gielgud on a movie.
Right.
One of the greats. And he said it took him many years to be able to walk across the stage and sit down and not be acting. And I got to see him. This was in the 70s on stage. And it was the same thing with Walter Matthau. They were effortless. And actually, I watched an interview. It might have been Jimmy Cagney's last interview once. And he was asked about, by the director, but anyway, this director was interviewing him, said, what do you think is the most important thing for an actor? To which he said, no strain. And Jimmy Cagney, another hero.
Icon, yeah.
You don't see it happening even. It's just so smooth, so organic, another overused word, but it was true,
Yeah, that's really well said. And my last theater question is, I had Austin Pendleton on twice, and he was talking about, I think, theater in the Berkshires. And I believe that's part of your life too, if I'm not
mistaken. I worked at the Berkshire Theater Festival twice. It was fantastic.
So, because I'm about 45 minutes away from the Berkshires, because if you go from Boston, I'm halfway between. Yeah. So, how popular is the Berkshire still a hotbed for theater and acting?
I'm not sure, but it was huge and it was so great. So, for example, I auditioned twice in New York for those things. Actually, the first time I was blessed I didn't have to audition, but the second time I did audition, and it's just the town, and so forth, and it's just it's a great place for actors. There's and it's just it's the best. I love Massachusetts.
Yeah, it's a wonderful place. You were born and raised, for those listening or watching. Your dad worked at the embassy. Is that correct, Nicholas?
United Nations, actually.
United Nations. I'm sorry, United Nations.
Sure.
And was it? You mentioned that there was a lot of traveling. Was it England, back and forth to England, or was it other places in Europe as well?
Well, it was that as well. But what the UN had, I don't know if they still have this at that time. There were a lot of perks. In other words, he didn't have a big salary, but the perks were incredible. So, for example, regarding travel, depending on where you were from, in his case, England, the UN paid for us all to travel to England every other year.
Right.
We elected to go, which you could at that time because it was the same fare, by ocean liner. So I was on all of those early ocean liners as a kid, the Queen Mary and even ones earlier. And that's where it was part of the experience of falling in love with the whole concept of so many different characters that were on the boat, and there were kids from every country running around. And again, another time it really was. And then, so actually what we would do is we would get to England and then from there jump on trains and go all over Europe, which was extremely easy at that time. You know,
The other thing I wanted to ask you about before we hop into your wonderful filmography is your brother Chris. For those listening, was in This Is Spinal Tap. Terrific actor, married to Jamie Lee Curtis. Are you guys close? Do you guys talk shop? Is it that kind of rapport? I mean,
no, not at all. I mean, the thing is, like, and I really understand this. He doesn't like to talk about the work. Like, what are you doing? And he goes, I went to the store earlier. You know, quiet about that. So that's fine. You know.
Yeah.
I would say, far more gregarious. You know.
Yeah.
But we grew up with this. A man who was not an actor, but who was very entertaining, British. And so we would say, "Good night, Dad." And he would fall to the ground and he would say, "I'm not your father." So we grew up being entertained. It was like, you know, that was the milieu that we were in, utter insanity, but in a good way, I think. It was very entertaining.
I imagine you guys had a great rapport growing up, right, as kids and developing. You know, I imagine it was just from the travel you're talking about. I mean, I'm not making it sound utopias, but like it seems like
we were really so fortunate. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just remarkable. I actually have also. I mean, I have a sister, but I have a half brother I'm extremely close to, who is in New York, Anthony Hayden Guest, who's an extremely successful journalist. And so when I was doing my first Broadway show in New York in 2018, and he lives there, and he grew up in England, but he's a New Yorker now. So I saw a great deal of him that year. It was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And your daughter has would you call it a web series guest appearances, Nicholas?
That's correct. And my wife and I are in it. Ed Begley is in it. His wife Rochelle, and we had the best time. There are 2 seasons of it.
Yeah.
And, she just was in New York, actually, my wife and Elizabeth, and she was starting to film it's going to be a feature. In other words, she's turning in the 2 series or 2 episodes of this series into a feature film, and everyone seems to be very excited about it because you know how foreign films often are sort of episodic.
Yeah,
that's what it would be, actually.
Very cool. And Ed Begley's been on the show too. Is he not the nicest man on the planet? Like,
I met Ed, you know, in the 70s. I mean, I've known him forever, and he's just funny and kind and all the rest, you know.
Yeah. And like you say, another time, because he has stories the same. Many are very kind of similar to the stories you have. I've heard you tell, and it's just
goodness. And his father. I mean, like, you know, everyone it should be mandatory to see his father's films, you know.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Super talented. Yep. Super talented. You know, one of the things you have kind of evolved into is the voiceover work. Is it how do actors perceive voiceover work, Nicholas? So if I said to you before your first voiceover job, I said, you know what's your take on voiceover work? How would you have described it?
Well, again, it's just changed dramatically, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I just lucked into, in New York, I used to do like sort of little cartoonish stuff that I started doing, and just to get, you know, into it a bit. But then, and a bit of radio too, which was fun.
Right.
And I love the whole notion that you can, obviously it doesn't matter what you look like. It's just, so you can play any character, you know, it's wonderful. But I came out to LA from New York, and I really lucked out. I started getting introduced to people. There was a show called Animaniacs, and
yeah,
very nice casting director on that. And I think I played a French frog, on that, you know. And it's word of mouth, you know.
Yeah.
I did one line for a movie called The Nude Bomb. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie. It's kind of
fun. Yeah.
For the actor from Get Smart.
Okay.
One line in Russian, because I love languages, so and I'm practicing. I played the Russian president on that show, Madam Secretary.
That's right. Yeah. Okay.
Jump into, you know, people from other worlds and so forth. But I think what happened for me, it's massive luck, is that it's word of mouth. You know, oh, he can do that, and the British I use a lot, and I lived in France for 2 years, so I do a quite a bit of work in French, which is a lot of fun. And I've started to do some German as well. It's just, you just jump in. And it does go back to the good fortune of having traveled and not been, I'm not afraid of other languages,
Yeah.
And if I'm wrong, please correct me. I'm always saying, please tell me how to pronounce it,
Right.
Yeah. And actually, years ago, I did something in Africa, and I thought I knew how to sing a certain song in the actual African language. And there was a man on the set, and he said, "Sing it for me, Nick." "No, I want to hear you sing it." And he said, "That's incorrect." And I started laughing, and we hugged, because I think it's really, really important as far as, going forward, to keep a sense of humor about yourself and to actually be in a place of, I don't know.
You open yourself up a little bit.
Open yourself up.
Yeah, I get it.
I went back to New York at one point when I was kind of going a lot back and forth a great deal. And I'd just done a TV movie. And the doorman of that particular building where I was living said, "Hey, Nick, I saw that movie you was in. Like, I'm supposed to believe you were that character? Get the hell out of here. Go get me a coffee, all right? I'm sick of this." I was laughing, and it's very freeing, as opposed to him saying, "That was amazing. You were great." The worst thing that could be said,
Yeah.
Always be in a state of, I don't know. Maybe I was terrible. So what?
Yeah. You have to be open like that in any profession. You have to be open to criticism. You have to be open to, because if you're closed off and you know it all, you're in big trouble.
Yeah, I was on an animation job once, and there was this man who was trained wherever he was trained, and the director kept saying, "I like what you're doing, but can you do this? Can you do that?" And he refused. He was like, "I know what I'm doing. I simply know what I'm doing. I was well trained. What are you talking about?" Now, was he hired again? No, because it's annoying. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, be open.
So I'm going to open myself up and ask you what this means, because I honestly don't. So your voiceover work is very extensive. When it comes to a couple entries here, Big Hero 6, Frozen, there are others. When it says additional voices, Nicholas, what does that mean?
It means I'm so fortunate, once again, that I belong to what are effectively these improv groups, and we're brought in after a film's been done, right. And we all speak different languages and do different characters, and we're there for the day. And so, for example, in the movie Frozen, one of the other actors and myself is it, "Do the British Guards rushing up towards the castle?" And we just do it. And so what we get credited, as doing those additional things. But it's very much an improv world. And oh my goodness, when I started doing that, when I first in like sort of 1979, people like Robin Williams were coming in and doing a line or two, just fooling around. People that had been in Second City, the Committee, which was from San Francisco, that improv group. And so I got in early to that particular world, and I was just, I keep saying it over and over. It's probably annoying, but I was just very lucky,
No, it's not annoying. I mean, but I have to tell you, Big Hero 6, I don't think a movie has made me get that, animated movie has made me get that emotional. That movie is spectacular.
It's amazing, isn't it, what it can do? Yeah.
It is powerful stuff.
Yeah.
And for the Sons of Anarchy fans listening, you're also the voice of John Teller, which is huge. I mean, he's a big part of that show. I mean, that whole show revolves around his life and his actions and his son and what he's done. Talk about, Nicholas, your experiences with Sons of Anarchy and what that was like.
Well, the getting of the job is always important. So, for example, I was sitting at Universal with my wife, Pam, and daughter, Elizabeth, and I got this message on my phone that they wanted me to audition. And I said, "Yeah, I'm going to take care of this later." And they said, "No, you're not. You're going to the studio right now to audition."
Wow.
I would not have gotten it, because as it turns out, I was maybe the first or second person that the producer heard and said, "Yeah, let's go with that voice." Because often there'll be 50 voices that they're listening to, but this was just another example of I lucked into it. And it was a great experience because it was very emotional, actually.
Yeah.
I thought it was brilliant. Really the writing and the whole setup, of course, which was Hamlet. Brilliant.
Is the process different for voiceover work, animated versus non-animated? Is it the same principle?
It's funny because in the beginning, I mean, this is my understanding, I could be way off, that cartoons used to be like character, like kind of silly voices, but it's actually gotten to a point where it really involves quote acting. Also, it sounds pretentious, but in a way, it's more engaging. So they treat it more seriously.
Right.
I mean, those people that did the early cartoons are geniuses, every one of them. But it's just this is a different chapter that began. Where okay, let's have quote, sort of real voices and real whatever that means, but actual acted, performances.
Yeah. And I have to say, a very underrated entry in your filmography is The Long Riders. Your brother was in it. I want to say Randy Quaid was in it with you as well.
That's brilliant.
Very, very underrated movie. Sometimes there's movies that get lost, not because they're bad or not. There's so much out there, but this is certainly one that people should unearth and really make an effort to see. It's a really fantastic movie.
Oh, thank you for that. No, that was a remarkable experience. And Walter Hill, just brilliant director.
Yeah. And, I do want to jump into, speaking of Randy Quaid, I wanted to jump into National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. It's based off of John Hughes's Christmas 59. Speaking of getting roles, how did you get this one, Nicholas?
Well, it's also a fun story. Okay, so I got the usual call from my agent, and I went over to, I think it was Warner Brothers. Jeremiah Chechik was the director, and I started to read a scene, and he said, "You would never say the lines like that." To which I said, "Actually, I would." Lean forward. And he said, "Okay, well, thank you so much." And I left, and I was walking across the Warner Brothers studio thinking, well, that was smart, Nick.
Yeah.
But the weird thing about all of this whole process is that that's what he was looking for. I didn't know that. He was looking for that arrogant, terrible, Todd Chester. So then I was brought back, actually, and I read with Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who's a genius, and the chemistry was there right away. All of the famous lines, we did those, in a tiny office, and he was just listening, and then I lucked out and got to do that part, and that it would become what it has become. It was crazy.
You keep saying luck, but I feel like unfortunate. But I feel like some of this you've earned. I think, Nicholas, don't you think you're being a little hard on yourself?
I tend to be a bit hard on this. That's true.
Yeah. Speaking of people, Jeremiah Chechik has been on the podcast. He's a very sweet man too.
Very nice.
Yes. It was a funny story, and you don't have to comment. It's up to you. But it's funny because Chevy has the reputation of being difficult. But I was listening to the old interview with Jeremiah about 3 years ago, and he had trouble with Beverly D'Angelo. He had difficulty. Yeah, and I it's just weird because there was the situation where Chris Columbus was supposed to direct, then he went to Home Alone. There was a situation there, but it's just funny to listen to what people go through on a set, how things evolve, and he's just a very honest and sweet man. And he was, and even with his experiences with her may have not been optimal. The way he told it was still full of class and very.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Why do you think this movie resonates with people so much, Nicholas?
Well, for one thing, I mean, what a cast, right? I mean, some of the old timers and just a brilliant cast. And I mean, Randy was extraordinary, but I think everyone is just perfect. And I thought Chevy was wonderful in it. It's just sort of innocent in a way. He's this big guy, and it was just the theme. It's like, what is Christmas about? And you can't get enough of it, actually. But they you have the quote nasty neighbors in a sense, that don't like children or any or what they are, but it's the seeking of joy, and to have that joyful Christmas, just that alone is a powerful thing. But back to the cast, it just was magical. Every single scene And that's a thing. That's a thing about movies. Also, Truffaut, one of my favorite, he's very famous, but one of my favorite directors said that you could have a great script, great cast, all of it, and then for some reason it doesn't work. You just don't know why. But this one did work. I really think there was something so true when it came to every character in the film. Remarkable.
Yeah. And it's number one by a mile, I feel like, for Christmas movies, but it's the only Christmas movie I feel like that people watch year round. It's not just a seasonal thing. And it's so, Nicholas, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but it's so quotable. Like if I'm with my friends and, randomly, if we see the floor wet, why is the floor all wet?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, it's just so fun. And it never gets old. This movie came out in '89,
right? And
it's still as fresh as the day it was released.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it starts with a superb script, and it's a superb script. I mean, it was, when I was saying the lines the way I did in that first one, I mean, it's written that way, for each character, he was brilliant. He was, obviously.
No, and you and Julie Louis-Dreyfus are brilliant too. I think you have the most, while Shedder's Full and all these other quotes are really great.
Yeah.
Todd and Margo have the best exchanges in the whole movie.
Yeah, I mean,
for my money.
She's extraordinary. She really is, and so kind. Also, incredibly nice person. My God, yeah.
Excellent actor. And Nicholas, you said you started to say something before, and I wanted to ask you this, but you talk about the bad neighbors. I got to tell you, maybe it's an unpopular take, but the Griswolds are the ones that are the bad neighbors. I mean, can you imagine? And I made a list today. I'm going to tell this to Nicholas. Runs the chainsaw after dark, threatens him on multiple occasions. The yelling, the swearing, a rotting RV parked outside the house, emptying a toilet into the sewer, breaking bedroom windows, chainsaws. Like, who is the bad neighbor? You have one group that keeps to themselves. Like, I'm sorry, after years of analyzing this movie, I have no life. I'll own that. But I'm sorry, the Griswolds are the worst of the two by far.
But that's what makes it so much fun, of course. I mean, all the essential insanity, the chaos. I mean, it's almost like a Marx Brothers movie in a way, isn't it?
Yeah,
the ins and absolutely, yeah.
Does your shooting schedule and Bill Hickey's shooting schedule ever coincide? And did you have a chance to meet him then? Talk to him?
I saw him years later, actually at a performance of a very famous actress who will remain nameless. So I sat next to him, and I said, "Do you remember I did such and such a scene?" He said he did. I don't know if he did, but that was also a time when. I'm referring back like the 1800s, when people spoke their mind more. Now people are very careful about saying anything critical,
Yeah.
But anyway, at the intermission, he turned to me and he said, "Nicholas, this is a dreadful play, and she's terrible. She doesn't know what she's doing." And you can't do that now.
Yeah.
My first in LA, it was like that. He was honest, and he would be leaving a screening and saying, "Who wrote this piece of garbage?" Which is so refreshing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, oh, that was brilliant. It's like everybody is like.
You're so right, Nicholas, because everything now is awesome and wonderful and brilliant and fantastic, and everyone's the next this or the next that. You're right. I mean, and I probably have a habit of doing that too. And you're right. There's an honesty that's been lost over time.
Oh my goodness! So, for example, Doris Roberts, who is brilliant, in Christmas Vacation, and I saw her on Broadway many times. But I'm going to connect a story here, which is difficult for me. I had the same agent that she had, the one who could voice what he felt about a movie after this. And she called him one day, and this story was told actually at his memorial, the agent's memorial. And she called him up and said, "Eddie, I met with the people at Paramount. What happened?" "They hated you. Call me later." And she fell out of her chair laughing. And that's why she stayed with him, because in addition to having fantastic humor, he actually told her the truth, that they didn't care for her. It's a fantastic thing.
Yeah.
As opposed to, "Oh, they loved you. They adored you. You're the best. They can't wait to work with you."
Yeah. And that honesty, that refreshing honesty,
And John Gielgud, who I got to work with, Peter Houston, all these amazing people. Carrie Fisher played my wife in this Appointment with Death. It was one of But John Gielgud said that in his day, I'm talking about like the 30s and 40s, you would go backstage. Let's say you'd seen a production of Romeo and Juliet, and he'd go back and he'd say, Romeo, not this time, darling. No, perhaps the next performance. You get a drink. It was like amazing.
Yeah.
So
You said it was Carrie Fisher that played your wife, right? Is that correct? Is that...
Yeah, that was a great experience. I mean, like, Lauren Bacall, everybody, all these people that you would never get to. I mean, it was like a 10-week or something of 10 weeks of shooting. It was remarkable. Yeah.
Nicholas, it's funny because I feel like, Carrie Fisher was never given enough credit for how wonderful of an actor she is. Not necessarily by her peers.
It's true.
And it's the same thing with the Christmas Vacation cast. So yes, it's got memorable quotes and wonderful, funny, but it's like that cast is an all-star cast. The problem is, I think, not the problem. I think the actors that were in it were towards the end of their career versus in the heart of it, right? Because
that is true.
And I think those that really don't know understands. I mean, I think when people look back now, it's like, oh my God, this was Hickey's a legendary actor. These are legendary actors. So, and I think that's kind of sneakily what makes that movie in some ways.
Yeah, that was true, by the way, also of Trading Places. Just
another.
Yeah, and I had a great time on that because, it was a brilliant script, great characters. And then I lucked into another thing. I'm sorry to go back to the luck thing, but
no, absolutely not.
I was in the bathroom of this building in New York City. It's called the Armory Building, actually, up on Park Avenue, and it has great acoustics. And I was in the bathroom with 3 of the other actors that I was in a lot of scenes with. We were the 4 friends of Dan Aykyrod.
Yeah, right.
And we started as a joke. We started singing in the bathroom, and so it's great acoustics, like the subway. If you want to,
right,
you go into the subway and sing.
Right.
And John Landis walked in and went, "That is funny. Write a song tonight, and we'll film it." And that's one of the other actors, Robert Curtis Brown, and myself wrote the song, and he filmed it like a day or 2 later. It was unbelievable. So we got writing credit. I mean, that was also a time of the director had power. There were people who wanted to come visit that set. And he said, "No, I don't want anyone around. I am directing this. This is my movie." And that's a different climate now too.
And Harry's a great character. And you know what? Give Landis credit because there's many directors in that time that also would have said, "Stop it! It's my movie. I'm not listening to any ideas."
Exactly.
Where he was open-minded. He was like, this is going to make the project better. And it's too bad some people can't put their egos aside just for a moment to make the entire project better.
It's really true. Yeah. And there was an amusing thing, and he'll remain nameless too. There was one of the actors who became annoying to Landis. And he said, "Okay, so in this scene, I'm going to come into the room, but I'm not going to sit." He said, "What?" Landis said, "What?" He said, "I'm not going to sit." He goes, "Yes, you are." That was like, "You will sit." And so it was funny though. And he knew, Jeremiah Chichik also knew exactly what he wanted in each scene. What a fantastic thing when the director knows exactly what they want and they're gifted. Pretty amazing combination.
And he doesn't get enough credit for that movie. I mean, I have the original poster from '86, and his name is on there. It's a wonderful poster, and it's like I just saw his name before our interview, and I'm like, I don't know. I'm in love with this entire thing. I don't want to gush, but like, it's just, I feel like we listen. I love John Hughes. I love the Chris Columbuses of the world. They're all wonderful. Jeremiah's put a couple pretty damn good projects up on the screen. Never mind the greatest Christmas movie in history, or you know what? Let me change that. One of the greatest comedies in history.
Absolutely. I mean, he's very gifted. He really is, and very kind. It's kind of
Nick, a combination. Yeah. Nicholas, thank you for all this time. I have a few more questions for you, if you don't mind. When you look back on the movie, what line from Todd has aged the best with you?
I don't know, Margo. My wife and I use it a lot, she'll ask me something and I'll say, "I don't know," in different ways, depending on the context of what's happening. It's so simple, but isn't it? It's just powerful, right?
And it's just like when I look back, it's like it just resonates so well. And how cool is that you're, Pamela is in the same profession as you are.
Yeah.
Do you guys run, when it comes to different projects, do you run lines with each other, or maybe with Elizabeth as well?
First of all, she's brilliant and has done, amazing stuff on her own. She's, she worked with John Cassavetes. She worked with Ilya Kazan. She played De Niro's secretary,
Wow.
Lampoon, I mean, she's worked with extraordinary people, and she's so gifted, and she's taught me so much. She studied with Uta Hagen and with Strasberg.
Wow.
I studied with Stella Adler. So there's just so much information, and our daughter Elizabeth, who as I was saying, we were talking about earlier, is going to make this into a feature with Ed.
Nice, yeah.
Is a brilliant director, actress, everything, and she is also very funny. So when we were doing the first scene of the web series, I had a line, and she said, "Are you kidding?" I said, "What?" She said, "You're not really going to say it like that." So there's immediately that ability to be critical, and she helps us with audition. So for example, I'll start doing it, and she'll say, "I'm so busy. You obviously haven't worked on this. So when you're ready, we can do this." It's like,
yeah,
we're so lucky to have, again, back to the honest thing and humor. To honesty and humor, top of the list.
Yeah. What's Elizabeth's take on Christmas Vacation or any of your work?
She loves it, but I have to say that she is brilliant herself.
Yeah.
I have to write everything down. See You Next Christmas, which is now on Peacock. And
wow. Okay.
You can witness, she's such a gifted actress, and she's in Groundlings now. She's been doing Groundlings, and
Groundlings is a pretty prestigious group. That's pretty impressive. Wow.
He's in a script writing thing with them now, and our son he's working on a show that's a continuation of a show called On My Block. I don't know, it's a TV show. But and he's having a good time, and so we're all sort of in this, which is fun.
Yeah, very talented family. It seems like it's a very similar situation for when you were a kid growing up. I feel like that's kind of what your kids went through. Is that, I mean, I don't know about the travel, but as far as the acting and the love for theater, is that kind of accurate?
So fortunate. I mean, Eli Wallach was one of the great actors of all time. He was like an uncle to me growing up, and I remember going to see a production of his the Lower East Side of New York, this small theater, and I had the good fortune of going backstage, and I said, "What's your first line?" So couldn't wait to hear his first line. But he was somebody I got to see over many years. He worked with it. Anyway, it's just, we were immersed in a world of really gifted people.
One of the last things I want to ask you was, when you look back at your career, when you look back at Trading Places, and I was thinking about you because they were giving Eddie Murphy an award at the Golden Globes. It was a Lifetime Achievement Award, and your sister-in-law was on stage, and it made me realize a couple things. One, how brilliant Eddie Murphy. I mean, not that I just came to that conclusion, but how brilliant Eddie Murphy was. But secondly, how really underrated Trading Places is. That was a phenomenal movie. Like again, there's so much that came out of the 80s. You forget sometimes how good some of this stuff is.
You do. And again, the script was superb. It really was. And an amazing cast. And the old timers, that was so smart to bring on the old timers, like you can't go wrong, when they're there, and it sets a tone. And yes, one of Eddie Murphy's greatest performances of all time.
Yeah.
Also, I loved him and everything, but 48 Hours he was great in, that Walter Hill did. It's just remarkable.
Yeah. When you get a chance, when you're with your wife or by yourself, is there a show that you binge? Is there a movie you've seen recently or an actor that you're fond of? How do you, from a fan's perspective, Nicholas, is there something that you really enjoy that you?
Well, this is obscure because it's a quote little movie, but I think it's up for awards and everything. It's an Irish movie. It's actually in Gaelic, and we watched it this morning, called The Quiet Girl. I think it's
okay.
And we love these movies that are just actor driven and it's extraordinary. We also love Olivia Colman.
Oh, she's great in The Crown. Oh my God.
She's also in this movie that takes place at a movie theater outside of in southern England, and Empire of the Light, it's called.
Yeah.
It's up for awards, and we got to meet her, and she is brilliant in the movie. But when you meet her, it's immediately evident as to why she's so good. She's so present and so just and vulnerable, and it goes on and on. It's incredible presence,
Yeah.
And again, unbelievably versatile. So versatile.
Yeah.
Movie, big time.
Yeah, and speaking of an actor's effect, I was looking at your cameo today, and it's amazing how many people, the videos you recorded are so sweet, and what people kind of like, how grateful they were for you to do that. Like, one of them, you went into full Todd for one of the, like, it was just, they're so sweet. Like, I don't know, to me as an actor, if I was in, you're in an iconic movie, which most actors have a tough, it's tough to do that. And you're a working actor, which is also impossible. So you've got the best of both worlds. Don't say it was luck, it was skill. Okay. And
I'll point to that. Yeah.
But like you are in one of the most iconic movies. You have people that remember your roles. I don't know, Nicholas. That's the thing for me. I feel like in life you want to leave an imprint, and I feel like you've done a really good job of that.
Oh, that's very nice. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Are there any projects that you can comment on? Anything you wanted to say outside of the web series? Anything you wanted to throw out there before I let you go?
I'm just so proud. For example, our daughter is also going to be doing. She wrote a one-woman show that she's going to be doing, and my wife and I are briefly in it. So
nice.
And that's going to be done at a theater out here. And then I had done a one-man show many years ago, and I'm thinking about doing it again, but I'm not sure I'm going to. I'm also writing, but I wrote about 4 chapters of something, but I've been, I think COVID, I thought was going to be a perfect time to continue on, but I've just stopped at the moment. But I hope to get inspired again, because I do want to share actually with people, experiences that I've had. And that's, of course, a way of, writing it all down, to pass it on. Yeah.
Nicholas, help me understand how somebody can remember all that dialogue. And I know there's breaks in a one-person show. How does somebody remember all that dialogue? Like you said, your daughter's doing it. I'm always fascinated by one person or one people's shows. I just don't get it. I don't know how people can do all that. And I guess there's sometimes there's breaks, but it's a lot of dialogue. Even if you don't get it word for word, it's a lot. I don't know. See, that's why that's one of the reasons I'm so impressed by actors. Like, I wish I could do that. I can't remember 2 consecutive sentences. I'm not like that. I don't know how actors do it, Nicholas. I don't know how it's done.
Obviously the rehearsal, you just rehearse and rehearse, and then I learned early on with people like Stella Adler, you're not, quote, memorizing lines. You sort of inhabit the dialogue. The dialogue becomes part of where you're moving, what you're doing. So, when we were kids, how we'd learn a poem and recite it in class. Like,
right.
Moved out to the
yeah.
That's the opposite. In other words, you have to really go to, what are you saying here? What do you want? And then, incredibly enough, the dialogue starts to fall into place. And it's not as tricky. It's just... Shakespeare is actually the easiest in a way, because it's so perfect. It's like how you can learn a song and it sticks more easily than dialogue, just regular dialogue.
Right.
But it's that thing of where it becomes part of what you're doing. It's not the words particularly. The words have to be there, of course, but it's I remember, actually, this is an obscure thing, but I was doing a movie once, and I said, I'm really having trouble with this dialogue. And it was a very nice director, too. I don't know what to do with this scene. What should I do? He said, thank you for sharing this. We're not going to have you say any of these words. When the other actor comes in and says that, you're going to just look up and go, I don't know. I just don't know. And it was better than the full page of dialogue that I was about to go into.
Wow.
Amazing. I mean, that's the thing about film. It's really when you're seeing, these images. And by the way, the museum out here now that's open, the Academy Museum is incredible. And you can go and you can see the first movies, which are really just these images,
Right.
It's images. But anyway, back to your question. So the dialogue, the lines, I think it's important to say, no, I'm not learning lines. I'm becoming this person, and this person speaks this way. It's also, I always enjoy it so much more when there's a dialect involved too, because you can just go to town with it, and then you can also borrow from people you've met. Like, for example, I was once playing a Frenchman, and I offered him some cheese, and he said, Nicolas, this finally is a meaningless cheese. Totally meaningless. So I've used him a lot.
Yeah.
Since I've played, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sort of embrace an attitude, and then the lines kind of come out of that. I don't know if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. I still couldn't do it if my life depended on it. But like, I get what you're saying. But like, it's an amazing process that you're describing. Like, it's just, as somebody that loves movies, I can appreciate it. I'll never be able to do it. It's like watching a football game. I could watch Tom Brady throw, but I'm never going to play in the NFL for 20 years. So
one thing though, I do notice, obviously in old movies, which we all know, is that the dialogue is so fast. They're moving like that. I am in awe of.
Yeah.
That's really,
Yeah.
Intense, which is
Nicholas, thank you so much for coming on today. Your work has made such a, you've been in my life since 1989, or even before that. But like, your iconic characters, everything else. It's just like, thank you so much. You don't know how much this means to me, and I hope I haven't wasted your time. You've been really a wonderful interview.
I really enjoyed this. Thank you, Derek. I really.
Yeah.